To order. For those of you watching, this is a typical Monday 1:30 or Thursday 1:30 sort of an update, more specifically about COVID items. It's informal, so that's how we're going to proceed. Typically what we do first is try to get some reports from our public safety officials to see if anything new has developed since the last time we met. Usually I like to turn it over to the fire chief because I don't like doing it.
We ordered the UV, some of the supplies that we ordered, the assistance to firefighter grant is starting to trickle in. Obviously, some items have long wait times. We ordered the UV lighting system that we hope to be able to use in the police cruisers, and that'll be in two weeks. So that's all I have.
On the COVID-related end of things, we don't have any new cases, no presumptive cases, so now Halifax is holding strong. Usually that's because of what I've seen out in the town is good discipline. There seems to be a lot of compliance in just the basics of wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance. So that's nice. We did have a confirmed case of Triple E in Middleborough.
That's close.
Don't know the town line. So I would say if it's in Middleborough, probably getting very close to us, town line Middleborough. So I would ask that the public be aware that not to have standing water in any yards, use bug repellent, try to stay out, or get in by dusk, and follow the normal protocols. The town is, does continue to be sprayed. That's what I have.
I have nothing on my end, COVID related.
Oh, that's good. Anybody else on the COVID issue?
Same stuff I gave the update on.
Same stuff, yeah.
And just,
Charlie?
well, given the state voted a 3-month budget. That doesn't mean July through September. It means actually August through October. I mean, we won't have a state budget probably until, if you went by that, you'd think Halloween. The problem is that the election is on the 3rd of November. That is extremely unlikely in my mind that the legislature is going to go back into session in October when they're running for election, which means now November. But I also think they're very equally prepared to wait even until the end of the calendar year. But one way or the other, we're not going to have a state budget, and we won't know the local aid numbers for several more months. I'm going to have a financial team meeting next week to talk about our options for our own budget, how we're doing the 1/12 budget so far, and then also town meetings, and then also setting a tax rate. Not that I think we should, but all these things have to come out on the table. I think the most probable scenario, while it will be very confusing to residents and taxpayers,
Hugely
because we haven't done an estimated tax bill for November 1st in decades, is that we will send estimated tax bills out for the first half of the year on October 1st. Those estimated tax bills, in essence, are a duplicate of what they got in May, 5 or 3 months ago. So the old valuation, the old tax rate for fiscal 20. Everything will be...
Why is the assessment the same?
Because the tax rate is based on the valuations.
Right, that's not going to change
So
until...
you can't change the estimated tax rate?
Can't get my value approved until this is over.
Which is going to be it's going to be interesting when we finally set a tax rate and new valuations, because there's a catch-up period in that first bill under the new numbers that we're going to have to educate people about so they don't get particularly shocked, even though they will.
So the bill would be the same as the May bill.
Right.
The following May bill would take up the whole increase for the year.
The difference, correct.
Yeah. So whatever, it will be, here's what your taxes for fiscal 21 should have been total. Here's what and it's based on the new valuation and the new tax rate. Here's what you already were billed in November. Here's how much left. And in general, the expectation is that we'll everybody will be paying a little bit more. If no other reason, then we are allowed to increase the assessment by 2.5%. Setting aside new growth and any other number of factors.
On the bill, can you put in huge bold lettering, estimate, and then
We'll say preliminary bill on it, and we're gonna put an explanation in, if we have to do this.
Yeah.
An explanation on a pink piece of paper or whatever, you know.
I've talked to Holly, I've talked to Pam, we're gonna have that financial team meeting next week, but I think everybody's in to help out,
Right.
both in terms of the mailing, including what you're all talking about, not just putting one word on the bill, but an explanation of the process, but then also we'll publicize it, via Facebook, yada, yada, and everything else we can do. I mean, we know we're going to get a lot of feedback, because we haven't done this for decades, but we're prepared to deal with that.
The collector has offered to put a form, or not a form, but an explanation along with the bill. They're going to insert that in the envelopes so that it gives some kind of rudimentary
Well, if
explanation.
you went on to the Division of Local Services, there's a 45-page explanation about semi-annual preliminary bill.
Yeah.
And,
Which we will not mail with the
No,
bill.
no.
Sorry?
We won't mail the 45 pages with a bill.
That should be,
We're going to try to simplify it as much as possible so it's understandable.
right, but it just explains everything.
Okay.
So eventually, the folks who should have paid a certain amount of taxes will pay that. It just happens that, let's say you didn't have a house on January 1st of 2019. Your bill in November 1st of 2020 will reflect only the January 1st, 2019 fact that there was no house. But you get the house in during calendar 19. The May 1st, 2021 bill will reflect the new house in its entirety. It's not going to be half of what you should have done it. The whole thing will be on that bill.
Except for the land will be.
Right, but that's why I was talking about the house.
Yeah.
And if land values go up a little bit, for instance,
Yeah.
that's only going to be reflected in the May 2021 bill too.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
And there will also be the abatement period.
in the spring, the abatement period will be in the spring rather than in the fall. The only other thing I gave, in terms of COVID, the only other thing I wanted to make sure the board did today, there's one non-COVID thing I need to do after we deal with all the COVID. The state has a directive that starting August 1st, anybody leaving Massachusetts and going out of state to a state other than the 6 New England states or New York or New Jersey has to, when they come back, quarantine themselves for 14 days. There are a number of exceptions to that, but that's probably covers 99% of it. It doesn't mean, for instance, but someone going to East Providence, someone going to Nashua, someone going to Portland, Maine, it's all fine. They can come back, there's no harm, no foul. They go down to Scranton, they go down to Washington, D.C., they go to Florida. When they come back, it's 2 weeks. If they don't quarantine, is a $500 a day fine for doing that. Now, they can get a test and show it and be clear, and then they don't have to do quarantine, but given the testing procedures and the amount of time it takes to get the result, that's, it may be 2 weeks before they even get that. So, but as part of that, as an employer, we need to both inform the resident, inform the employees of the state's travel policy, but also how they would, as employees, and how the town as an employer will have to deal with them coming back if they go to one of those states. The idea being that the default is quarantine for 2 weeks. If they can work from home during that period, then great, they'll work from home during that period. If they can't work from home during that period, then their options are to take what I've called sort of federal COVID leave, or sometimes it's called Families First leave or something like that. Basically, earlier in the spring, the federal government said that employers must provide 2 weeks of, call it sick leave, but leave for their employees who have COVID or suspected of having COVID, or for instance, are quarantined. So if an employee has not already used that leave before, they can use that leave for this purpose. So they'll be paid for those 2 weeks of quarantine. We may have a few people who have already used this Families First leave. If that's the case, they can use other leave through the town, vacation leave, sick leave, personal leave, so they can be paid during those 2 weeks. If they have used all their leave, their Families First leave and all their paid leave, they will be on unpaid leave. They're not going to be fired, they're not going to be terminated or anything like that. They'll just be on unpaid leave for those 2 weeks, and then they can return. They still have the option of getting the test, getting a clean bill of health, and being able to come back.
Are they eligible for sick bank?
I would say so, yeah.
Charlie, can I ask, is that federal leave, the federal government didn't give us any money?
No.
For that. Is that reimbursable through the CARES Act?
It might be.
So, in my department, where we have to fill 1-for-1, and obviously the firefighters can't work from home, I've already heard of 3 individuals that told me they're going hunting in October in Pennsylvania. So,
We don't know what, this is a flexible situation.
so Pennsylvania could fall in or out.
Yes.
But if they come back and don't want to do the COVID test,
Then they're out for 2 weeks.
right, but is that, if it went through CARES, would that?
We might be able to get reimbursed.
We don't have any budget for that.
Right, but we might be able to get reimbursed.
And then the second part of the question is, are we telling the employees, like, you need to quarantine? I mean, I think that,
Well, that's,
maybe some people
this-
think of it as an additional 2 weeks.
well, it's too, no, this is the thing, we're a subdivision, we're reminding them of the state law. If this town does not issue the fine, there's a $500 a day fine, that's a state fine issued by the state, not the town. Or by,
Who's the issuing agency of that?
I mean, the actual fine, I'd have to go check. But we're a subdivision of the state, so we're probably going to have an obligation that if we're aware that Michael or Mary, who's an employee of ours, is violating the quarantine, to inform the state of that fact. As a subdivision, not just as any employer, but as a subdivision of the state. Now, if they came back, if for someone, let's say someone's, I didn't go anywhere, and we find out they did, and they've come back to work, they could be subject to discipline. Because what they've done is endangered themselves, their fellow employees, and the general public by deciding to violate quarantine. So, but I need, if the board want, if we're going to do this, the board needs to approve it. If the board doesn't approve it, we really don't have a policy. All we're left with is the state saying it's fine, the $500 a day fine. We haven't instructed employees about the fact of what they can do if they are going to, for instance, go hunting in Pennsylvania.
So could we just amend it to add D, could be eligible
Sure.
for sick bank?
Yeah.
Chair,
Done.
I move, Mr. Gammon. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
A second. I do have one more question. On the we can't require, so say it's the fire department and 3 guys are out, we can't require them to take the COVID test, right?
No,
No.
I don't think so. They can quarantine. They'll have to do one or the other. They're going to have to quarantine or they're going to have to take the COVID test.
But they don't have to take the test.
No.
But they got to do one.
Yeah.
And the test is at their cost.
I would say it's I would say it's at their cost because they made that choice. I mean, the town did not force them to go to Pennsylvania. They made a conscious decision to leave the safe zone, so to speak, and go to Pennsylvania. We didn't tell them they had to. If we have required them as a matter of their job to go to Pennsylvania, then yeah, pick up a fire engine, for instance, let's say it was being made in Pennsylvania, then I would say yeah.
I think most insurance, everyone has insurance, is covering COVID testing.
Yeah, well, yeah, the insurance will, but it's going to, in essence, it's at their cost. It might be a copay or something like that.
So the other item here is that once so they could have a COVID test in Pennsylvania,
Yep,
but they're quarantined for at least 3 days here.
right, but the thing, because, I mean, they can't take the test any earlier than 3 days before they get back. And I think the assumption, what we're saying is, we also want 3 days of non-symptoms, just to ensure, because what happens if you pick it up in between, let's say you're coming back on Monday, you take the test on Friday when you're in Pennsylvania, well, you're still in Pennsylvania for the 3 days.
Right.
And the thing is, you're going to have, unless you're finding a facility that's going to give you fairly quick results fairly quickly, it's probably going to be at least 3 days, if not more, until after the test to get a result.
So you're gonna have to plan for at least 3 days out for everybody that.
Yeah. That's why I asked, I mean, because really, depending on how many people go on vacation, it could really start getting expensive in departments that have to fill one for one. Other departments might be able to let people work from home or something like that, so if it is reimbursable, who cares? It'd be good to just keep.
Yeah, I can send it to Plymouth, the question to Plymouth County. I suspect, let's put it this way, I mean, Plymouth's taken the position that if you didn't budget for this, which obviously we never could have because it didn't exist when we did budgets, then I think it should be an eligible expense, but I can get that confirmed. And then we just have to get the documentation showing that the person was, whatever leave they're out for because of quarantine, you can put quarantine sick time, quarantine vacation time, quarantine whatever on the time cards and on the timesheet, work with Sandy, and then we get a total and submit it to Plymouth.
You still haven't got a vote yet, man.
Aye.
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 Unanimous.
I think Troy moved it.
Karen moved it, Andrew second, and it was unanimous.
I did provide the board, this was a totally different thing, was information about the Housing Choices Bill. What the MMA is asking is for going with the House version. It really doesn't affect us directly in the sense of what the question is. I guess there's a Senate version that says cities and towns have to have a district that allows multifamily zoning. We already do, obviously. So it really doesn't affect us. It'd be more just if the board wanted to say, no, fine, let's contact our delegation to ask them to go with the House version rather than the mandate version. That would be fine. And then I have one other thing because of the timing issue.
Are you expecting a vote today? Because I haven't had a chance to read it.
Well, what the MMA is saying is that, they're supposed to negotiate a final version within the next 24 hours.
Oh.
So they're saying that they're expecting to get something approved this week. I assume because the legislative session officially ends, at least this one does.
I think they just voted to extend the job.
Well, yeah, but through the time of the budget and things like that, I don't know if the Senate did.
They're not, on the radio, they said they weren't gonna take that break.
Okay, so I don't know what they're gonna do or not do. That's all I can tell you is what the MMA sent out a couple hours ago. But if the board wanted to do something with that, I know it didn't put on the agenda because it only came in a couple hours ago. If the board wanted to do something with that, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine. But then I have open meeting law complaint that came in last Thursday. It wasn't on the agenda for Tuesday's meeting, and the board has to deal with it within a 14-day period, so it has to deal with it either at this meeting or a meeting before or up to next Thursday. And I'll get to that in a minute once the board tells me if it wants to do anything with the housing bill.
I personally am not inclined to do anything with it. I think we've got it covered. I don't think we need to weigh in at this point, especially at the last minute. I don't know how everybody else feels.
It says the list of communities that would be penalized if they do not implement state, and we're listed as a community that would be penalized.
Right, but we already have multifamily housing.
Yeah.
So it's basically everybody in these categories, but
Yeah, I'm not in favor of
No.
supporting legislation that you have 3 minutes to review.
Right.
Exactly.
No, that's fine.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so the open meeting law complaint was filed by Amy Troop on July 23rd for the Selectmen's meeting on June 23rd. What had happened was the board had received a letter from the chairman of the Conservation Commission, Jerry Fitzgerald, asking that certain actions be taken concerning Ms. Troop. When I had written up the agenda, unfortunately, instead of putting her name in, I put the word "her" in. It was not meant to be derogatory, uninformative, or anything like that. That was a mishap on my end, and I take full responsibility for that. But it was an inadvertent, it wasn't purposeful to avoid her being mentioned in the agenda. So the letter I drafted for this says that, in fact, an open meeting law violation did occur. We're not questioning that at all. What I would do is provide the board with an updated version of the guide, the open meeting law. The board could discuss the open meeting law at a future meeting. I did note in the letter back that this was not a hearing of any sort that was held on June 23rd. It was simply a matter of dealing with a piece of correspondence from the chair of the Conservation Commission. If it had been a hearing, Ms. Troop would have had certain rights even under an open session hearing, let alone an executive session. This was not an executive session matter. And the board has not further deliberated on that matter since the matter came up on June 23rd. So I did not know what the board wanted to do in terms of response to Ms. Troop's complaint. As I mentioned, we have a 2-week limitation in terms of being able to respond to this. So it will be too late by the time the board holds its next regular meeting on August 11th. The board could just make a decision about this today. They could continue this to Monday. It even possibly, I think, could continue it to the following Thursday.
To say, we don't always meet on Monday.
Right.
So that's probably not a good idea. I've read this twice now. I think it's an adequate response. I wouldn't have a problem signing this document.
There's 2 typos I saw just real
Wow.
quick.
Okay, well, if you tell me the typos, I'll get it corrected.
Law has 2 W's in it on the first sentence,
Okay, thank you.
and then
Intentional.
intentional doesn't have an L.
Right.
I seem to be wanting to add letters.
Doesn't sound like autocorrect, though.
If it was autocorrect, it would have been dealt with otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, maybe, or they would have just substituted a different word.
Yeah.
Do you want to fix the corrections, and we'll take a vote to sign it once it's corrected? Does that
Then-
meet everybody's pleasure?
What was the June 23rd?
Yes.
I just want to look at what we had for an agenda posted online. we'll see where you have it going, so. Fine to vote this.
Yes,
Good. Can I get a motion?
so moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have nothing else to bring to the board at this time. I don't know, chiefs, anything else? Bob?
Chief, Middleborough Triple E, come take it home.
It stops at Lakeville. We have a wall. It stops there.
The Great Wall of Lakeville?
Yeah. So easy, not the mosquitoes.
Do you have one of those big mosquito things from the 1980s that just zaps everyone?
Yeah. Everyone. Not just the mosquitoes, everybody.
Get the strip, right? Big strip.
If that's it, does anyone else have anything? No?
Motion to adjourn?
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.